This morning's exercise is all about trying to figure out the hierarchy of the kinds of centers you have in this community and what the vision for those ought to be. And for that, we've used a series of pilot centers, which is the maps you're seeing on the table. So we're going to test out some ideas in some selected places with your help, and that will help inform how we deal with all of the centers through the whole town. So we're going to go through a little presentation this morning on the goals, our team, what we're doing this week. We're going to give you a little bit of food for thought, and then we're going to run a breakout session because, in fact, you guys today get to be the rock stars and tell the consultants what you know about these areas and what you think about the future vision for these areas. So, the goals for the project. Overall, my contract says I'm going to deliver a couple of things. An update to the comprehensive plan with regard to the centers, not the residential areas, the commercial centers and the mixed-use activity centers in the town. That we're going to, in the process of talking about that comprehensive plan, we're going to set a more clear vision for each of the centers and what it ought to be in the future. As things grow and change, what should this center become? In addition, we're going to update the town's zoning code. So the actual rules that the developer uses to build in those centers will be part of this conversation. The intent of updating that is to get a stronger link between the vision that we set and what shows up on the ground. Less surprises is really where we're headed here. And apply that new zoning to the centers throughout the town. So replace the one-size-fits-all zoning stuff that we do today with something that is more tailored to each place. So today's exercise is really about understanding how we're approaching the centers, understanding what they might be like in the future, and then discussing existing conditions and a future vision for 6 specific places in town. 2 of them have been stuck together, there are actually 5 sets of tables here. Introduce you to my team this morning. From my office, Code Studio in Austin, Texas, Colin Scarf, my business partner, and our associate, Kevin Howard. From Common Ground Design in Nashville, Keith Covington here, and Lee Jones at the back table there. By tomorrow, I'm going to have an illustrator who's going to make us all look good. He's a guy with real digital skills, and you'll get to see his stuff next Wednesday if you come see the closing presentation. Dave Versell from Garner Economics has been working for the town on a different study, on a study of the future, especially of the office market in this area. And he happens to be available to be here, so we've kind of tacked him onto our team for a couple of days, Monday and Tuesday. He has a lunch and learn on Tuesday at Harlem Road Community Center that you can come to and hear a little bit about the economics if that's really your kind of thing. In addition, Annette, where's she hiding? Annette is here with her staff from Home Run Creative to kind of capture some of the flavor of this. They've prepared the website and have been managing the conversation with the community, especially the social media and other kinds of public outreach. So I want to tell you, most of the events that we're doing this week and our home base is at Harlem Road Community Center. Is there anybody who's not been to Harlem Road Community Center here? I think if you're an involved citizen, probably you've gone to a meeting there at some point, right? So we'll be back in the community meeting rooms. I think everybody knows where those are, up on that, the first floor, I think, is still called the upper floor as you come in the doors. That community center will be open from pretty much from 9 in the morning till 8 p.m. and we'll be working there every day. If you want to follow the project If one of your neighbors has an interest in the project and just wants to catch up because they couldn't come on Saturday, they can drop in that Harlem Road Community Center almost any time. The times are shown on the sheets that maybe you got when you walked in. Thank you. On this sheet, so the times are shown here. If it says Open Design Studio, that's where we're at. Saturday, Sunday, and Tuesday we'll be there from 9 to 8. Monday we're stopping at 3 because we're going to run a set of open houses. I'll talk to you a little bit more about those. And then Wednesday we're stopping at 2 so we can finalize our presentation, because if I'm spending all my time talking to you, I'm not getting my presentation ready. So, but basically, we want this to be considered an open and transparent process. You want to come talk to us again, you want to talk about this project some more, if you want to get a little more in-depth knowledge about a particular parcel of land you own or that's near you, all of those are possible. So here we are at the start of the Charette Week with the hands-on workshop. This is your chance to shine as someone who understands your town better than me as an outsider, right? I'm coming in, I arrived on the airplane, I show up, I tell you what to do. No, that's really not the model we're trying to use here. The model we're trying to use here is to have you share with us what you know about these places, so that we can then apply our technical expertise to get to where the community wants to go for these centers. So the hands-on workshop is really an experience. You can see another example here. This is the Stockyards in Fort Worth. But it's an experience in which we'll be talking to you from a planning perspective about what these places are like today and what they might be like in the future. Hands-on workshops mean writing on the maps. If you say something and someone didn't write it down, it will not get back to the design team, right? So a big part of today is about capturing your ideas, getting them written down on the tracing paper, etc. The moderator that's at your tables is not going to be drawing, right? It's not their job to draw some brilliant ideas right in front of you. It's in fact your job to help us get the information we need to understand these centers. And that means you're going to help us by marking up that map. In the end, you'll be presenting back to each other from this hands-on workshop. It's a really critically important thing to hear from your own neighbors, not from the outside experts, but from your own neighbors, what they think the future of some of these places are and what the big ideas are. In addition, this afternoon we'll be drilling down a little bit further. We're moving over to the Harlem Road Community Center. The Open Design Studio will start getting set up in the afternoon, and we'll start our stakeholder meetings, as we call them. And so if you have a very strong interest and you not only showed up this morning but want to show up again this afternoon, we have a time slot for each of the pilot centers, and you'll see them there. And those will run until the end of the day today. Tomorrow, our team will be working and brainstorming separately. The pilot center meetings are really a chance for us to go a little bit beyond the discussion from today. You'll be sitting down with one of the designers this afternoon that is actually going to be working on that center, and they may have more probing questions than we'll have time to get to this morning. There are also 2 opportunities to learn more in general about where this stuff might be headed. And one of those I'll run on Monday on form-based codes and sort of the newest approach to zoning that people are using around the country and how that might apply here, right? That is a drop-in opportunity. Bring your brown bag, bring your takeout, go hungry, whatever. Just come from 12 to 1 and stop in and see us. The second day will be Dave Ursell talking about his market analysis work. It'll be the first time that has been presented publicly, so it'll be a very juicy opportunity to be on the cutting edge of understanding what the market is doing in this area. The Lunch and Learns are really just a small group session where we'll do about 30 minutes of presentation and 30 minutes of Q&A. But it's a great chance to really learn more about what's going on in a more technical fashion with a technical expert. The drop-in open houses are a real opportunity. Part of the reason we come for a full week is that we could come, month after month and drop in for a little 2-hour evening meeting and see you again and then go away again and do our thing and come see you for 2 hours again. The feedback loops become very long then, months at a time. And really what we're talking about here is having a feedback loop from this morning's session with some material that we can share with you already by Monday night about what we're thinking after we've filtered through all of what we've heard from you. And so that drop-in open house, it's going to give you a chance to look at all of the centers. If you happen to be available in the afternoon, we're going to be down at the, as you guys call it, the Mosey at the Wyndham in the lobby for a couple of hours, talking about all of the centers together. Then we're going to pack up one set of the centers and send them out to separate locations for each, the same way that we have the separate tables here. So in the evening, we're going to run the same open house with the same material. It's just instead of getting to see all of the centers together, you're going to see material specifically from each center somewhere near that center. The locations for those drop-in open houses are on the back of the Charette schedule. So if you just go to the section that talks about those open houses, it has each of them. Eggertsville and Snyder will be at the IDA building. The Northtown one is right there in the plaza at the Riverside Men's Shop. We'll be in the front of the men's shop there. The Gettsville one at the Walton Pond Center, and the Transit Road one at the Main and Transit Fire Hall. Those are a chance for you and your neighbors to come somewhere close by. So if you live near one of these pilot centers, you can just drop in and see what's going on. They are called drop-in open houses for a reason. You can stop in for 5 minutes if you want. There's no formal presentation. You'll get a chance to walk through all of the exhibits and all of the things we have done to date. They'll be posted up in some fashion. You'll be able to discuss that center, but it is not a formal experience. So you can come anytime between 3 and 6, and actually the Wyndham will be active from 3 all the way until 8. But from 3 to 6, well, 3 to 5:30 maybe, we'll have all of the centers there. Then we'll be breaking down and sending some of them out to the remote locations and running the evening open houses. So a chance again to kind of see whether we were listening well enough on Saturday morning and whether we're capturing what you were saying. That's headed for this final feedback loop then, the work in progress presentations. So there's these kind of loops of information here in which we're touching base with you again. So again, each of the centers separately, all of the centers together in the afternoon. So on Wednesday night, we'll present the results of this working week. It's a fairly flashy show. It's as much interesting urban design stuff as we can get done between Sunday and Wednesday night. And actually, usually a fairly amazing quantity of stuff gets done in that time. So thank you to my team in advance for all the late nights I know we're going to spend in trying to get to Wednesday night. That work in progress presentation is a formal presentation, so it's probably a 45-minute long presentation. And then we break out and you can see all of the materials and ask questions and discuss it for a while afterwards. And while that is the end of the week, that's not the end of the project, and we'll talk about that some more after this. So one last thing, that Open Design Studio, the Harlem Road Community Center studio, will be open this afternoon, all day tomorrow. In fact, we've had people ask to go later in the evening, so it's going beyond 7 to 8 p.m. If that matters to you, both Saturday, Sunday will be open till 8 p.m. We'll be open in the morning before the open houses, because then we have to go and run the open houses. We'll be open all day up until the working committee meeting on Tuesday, and we'll be open in the morning on Wednesday. So any of those times are fair game. When it says Open Design Studio, it means it. You can drop in and see what's going on, and someone will talk to you. No guarantee that you're going to get to the designer that's working necessarily on your center, because they've got work to do, but you're going to get a chance to speak with somebody about what's going on in that center. And the Open Design Studio is a combination of sort of old school drafting, pen and ink kind of work, as well as digital work product later in the week. So, a little bit of food for thought for this morning. Can you still hear me in the back well enough? Yeah? Good. Thank you. So, on your table is material for 2 different exercises. The first exercise is a town-wide one, where we're going to try to get you to look at all of the centers and help us think a little bit about all of the centers. We're going to show you how they are managed today and what the comprehensive plan says today about them. But then we need you to talk a little bit about how our pilot centers fit into that framework and whether it seems like that framework's working or not. I believe the conclusion you're going to come to is that the current framework doesn't really speak to your centers the way you might like to, and that's part of why we're here. In addition, there's some analysis maps on your table, these little 11 by 17 sets. They're specific to the named place that is your place, and they have the zoning, the land use, and some other kinds of things about the actual physical location. So if you happen to want to be turning yourself into a planning wonk for the day, you can have a little look at the analysis. There is we call the zoning memo, which is this big fat memo from our office. But the main thing about it is when you're looking at all of the centers, it's got every single one, it's got them bounded with an aerial photo, and it shows what their zoning is. So in case you have a specific question or comment about one of those centers and you want to back it up a little bit, there's a packet with which you can do that. In addition, there is a set of precedent sites on your table. There are 10 examples of mixed-use development from other communities that are in these examples, in case you just want a little something to spark your imagination or to understand how some of these things might go. The facilitator at your table might use them to sort of show an example of something that they might be talking about in considering something in the future for your area. So, the first exercise is on the double map of the centers, which might be buried on your table, but feel free to peek underneath there if you want. The 2 maps represent 2 different ways that the city categorizes centers today in the comprehensive plan. So the first way that it talks about centers is on the left-hand map that says all centers by scale. So the first way it talks about the centers in town is with the size of the center altogether, right? Is it regional sized, right? On substantial acreage with big buildings? Or is it neighborhood sized? And so the neighborhood, community, regional is often used, it's often characterized this way. A neighborhood center is usually the thing there today is the pharmacy, right? Which we all know is not just a pharmacy, it's the convenience store, etc. Whether in this town it's CVS or Walgreens or Rite Aid or whatever the chain happens to be. That's usually the big thing at the neighborhood scale, is something like that. Buildings aren't really exceeding 25,000 square feet, and in fact a usual Walgreens or something like that is 10 to 15,000 square feet. The community size center, this is something that has often a grocery store. So in most communities that I work in, I can talk about grocery stores as being 40,000 to 60,000 square feet in size. Only you guys have Wegmans. So Wegmans has got stores of 100,000 square feet and 120,000 square feet. They're really big and really amazing. So anything that is anchored by a grocery store is often thought of as a community scale center. The regional center, then, that's where you find things like malls, big box shopping, anything that's really large scale. And then here, in order to capture one flavor that is very particular to what's going on in the town of Amherst, you also have the traditional center. Now, originally, I think everybody was thinking of Eggertsville and Snyder when they started talking about traditional centers. So one of the questions is, are there other places that ought to be treated like Eggertsville and Snyder, as traditional centers. They usually have the smallest uses in them because they're the most tightly knit into their surrounding neighborhood, right? They're immediately abutting that surrounding neighborhood typically. So that's one way of thinking about them, based on their scale. Now the town also designated some because they sort of had special purposes. So they designated the mixed-use activity centers, as they were called in the plan, and there were a number of them throughout the town, and they designated some of them as university-related. There were some that were special uses. Included in that would be the hospital, for example. There were highway and intersection centers, and then there were urban village centers. So the reason we put two maps together on one sheet of paper there for you to look at is you'll find that things are called one thing in the one map and something else in the other map. And it's really hard to figure out what your centers are supposed to be when they grow up. And that's one of our conclusions as outsiders is, I don't know how anybody who might be a developer or otherwise coming to town here and trying to do something in one of your centers would understand what the town really expects of them, because there's mixed messages in the plan right now. So we're going to have a look at that and make sure that you understand that, so that as we come forward with a new model for how to think about all of these centers together and some kind of, we hope, consolidated community vision for the centers, we can all be on the same page. So, admittedly, this sounds kind of super plannery and like it's not your thing. But don't worry, we have low expectations for this portion of the process. We really are trying to get at one thing and one thing only. Please think about the whole town for a little bit before we think about your neighborhood, right? That's primarily what we want out of this first exercise, is spend a little time with us thinking about how the whole town's commercial centers function before we focus in on your specific pilot center of choice. So the 6 locations, Gettsville, Northtown, Eggertsville and Snyder have been paired on the map for this morning, so it's really 5 sets of maps, Village West and Transit Road. So one of the things that we're going to do is when we get to the pilot center discussion, we're going to make sure you're at the pilot center of your choice, the one of these that you would like to talk about the most. The main reason that these pilot centers were selected is because they have specific characteristics that we expect will affect the way we zone them and the kinds of rules that developers might have to use to build projects in those places. So what are the rules that go in zoning? Well, first and foremost, we regulate use. What kinds of uses can be in your center? Is it mixed use? Whether vertically mixed use, meaning in the same building, or horizontally, meaning nearby in buildings that are grouped together? Is it just commercial? Is it just office? Does it have automotive uses? Now, in many communities, automotive uses are kind of in a select part of town. Not so sure that's true here. I think if we looked at all of our centers, almost all of them have something automotive embedded in them. So what's our thinking about that as we move towards the future? So use is one thing. Building placement. Okay, this sounds like all fancy planner talk, but what we're really saying is the building pulled up to the back edge of the sidewalk? Is it sitting back behind some limited amount of parking? Or is it sitting way back on the site with a huge sea of parking out front, as in many of your larger centers? That's building placement. The location of parking also affects urban design. If you build townhouses this way, my little girl is not going to ride her bike down this street. Whereas if you put the parking behind, then along that sidewalk, you can have free-range children. Building height. We know this is a topic of discussion in town, And we usually talk about, keeping height in character with an area. These buildings are all different height, but they're sort of the same. But this one has 4 stories. This one has a different kind of 4 stories. This uses almost the same height for 3 stories, but kind of they're in character together. And usually the worst thing you can do is set extreme differences in building height. In fact, when this community approved this building, they basically signed the death knell for this little guy, because what's somebody going to come do? They're going to buy a couple more lots and say, I want a big building like that. And this lovely little building will likely disappear sometime because it's not been protected in terms of its building height adjacent to it. Another thing about centers has to do with the size of the adjacent street. Where are the regional centers, the really big ones here? They're associated with the really big roads. If you have little tiny roads, you should not be building the kinds of commercial centers on those that attract lots and lots and lots of people, or will blow the roads out and you'll get really big roads in places you didn't want them. So thinking about the size of the adjacent streets and what does that mean for the support of the commercial activity there. And finally, this is Gettsville. This is the belated ITT Tech building. Looking at the surrounding neighborhood, the relationship between the ITT Tech building and the immediately adjacent neighborhood is a fascinating one because it's across a street. So it's residential on one side, commercial on the other. Often we change zoning at the back lot line. And so you'll see this when you look at the Northtown area. You'll see things right adjacent to each other. The commercial zoning is actually over onto that housing side, if you will. But one of the things that differentiates traditional centers from something that might be deemed more suburban is whether I can get there from the neighborhood. So if you think of Snyder and Eggertsville, they're right there embedded in the neighborhood. The streets extend right there. Whereas if I'm here and I live in this neighborhood back here, there's no connection between this and any of the adjacent development. So thinking about those connections and the richness of the network that's there, thinking about the surroundings, is part of the conversation here. You could have something which looks exactly the same from the street, but because of the surroundings actually acts very differently and therefore needs a different kind of zoning. So those are just some things, that's just a little food for thought for you as you go through thinking about this. The second exercise, the latter part of the morning, is to work on a specific pilot center. And as I mentioned earlier, we not only have the pilot center map on the table, but we have these examples for you. And the examples talk in the upper right corner, you'll say, they see things like deep and large parcels. So working as we often do with urban designers when we prepare our zoning, we spend a lot of time thinking about how the rules are driven by the kind of place you are. So shallow parcels along the corridor have less flexibility to be a good transition to the neighborhood because there's just not enough land area to put the use and also make the transition. Deep and large parcels, we got a lot more elbow room. We can be more creative in our planning for those. So some of the things that we saw as issues, we wanted to show you successful, in our minds, examples of precedents. So that's what that set is. If you get a chance to peek at those, each of the areas that are the individual test areas are intended to test one of these ideas. Shallow parcels, deep parcels, the transition into the village, suburban node, and traditional node. All different ideas about urban form. So again, that's our centers: Gettsville, Northtown, Eggertsville and Snyder together, Village West, and Transit Road. So when we break out, I want to make sure that we fill up tables, at least one table for each of these, and we'll go to 2 tables if we need to. Based on what we know right now, we're going to have 2 tables for Eggertsville and Snyder and 2 tables for the area west of the village, between the thruway and the village. And otherwise, we're going to have 1 table each for the other flavors. And we'll help you get established at the right table as we break up. So again, here are those ideas that we used from the precedent examples. And they're ideas about urban form, which again might be a whole nother way to think about the hierarchy of centers throughout the town. So one is sort of that suburban node, that thing that sits in an area in which the streets are not really connecting to the commercial. It is its own little thing, right? It's a standalone element. Some other suburban nodes, other than the Gettsville example, we looked at Hopkins and Dodge. We looked at some other places, especially in the northern portion of the community, where the centers themselves are standalone. You drive to them. They have very poor connections to the surrounding neighborhood. Deep and large parcels. Northtown is our poster child for today, but there's tons of it along Sheridan. There's tons of it along Transit Road. There's tons of it along Niagara Falls Boulevard. There's actually a deep and large parcel embedded in the traditional node at Eggertsville, the Key Bank site, right? That former department store is a deep and large parcel embedded in an area that is mostly chopped up very finely. So what kind of zoning applies to that? Is it a mix and match of traditional ideas and one big parcel? Or does the big parcel actually have to act like a traditional node? This is a conversation the community needs to hold about that site. The Williamsville Edge. The principal reason we've included the Williamsville Edge is what we're sitting in right now today, this building. What are we going to do as we go from that interstate and its intensity, where there's no single family right next door, and then we're headed for the village? So the village, now right at the edge, we've got the Wyndham. It's 5 or 6 stories tall. It's a quite bulky building right up to the street edge. Is that what we want, to go all the way out to the edge where the interstate comes by? That's an open question, and that's part of the reason that we put this one on the table, is to start to have the tough conversation about the heights that have to happen in that area and the urban form. Are we trying to drag that village Main Street look all the way out to the interstate? Or are we transitioning in some way in between? Those are some of the challenges of working here. The shallow corridor parcels, Transit Road is our poster child for that, because the piece of Transit Road south of Main, the southernmost portion as you reach down to the town line, is 1 parcel deep along there. Doesn't even go to the back street. And so those parcels are 100, 125 feet deep, just like single family lots. And we're trying to fit commercial development in on something that is the size of a single family lot. So how do we deal with those shallow corridor parcels? So this is kind of a way of thinking about those places that has more to do with their urban form than it does necessarily with the way they've been designated by the town in the comprehensive plan so far. So one of the things that, some final announcements before we break out here. Tell your friends and neighbors to get involved, right? There are the formal events that are on your schedule. They're welcome to come to any and all of those. There are the open design studio opportunities. So anybody who's even vaguely interested ought to be able to find a time in all of those time slots to come and get engaged with us and have a conversation. Second, there are a variety of ways for people to comment on this. If you're not the kind of person who's going to go sit at a table and say how you feel in front of a bunch of other people because you already know how they feel because you heard them before, then you may want to comment privately. So you are welcome to do that both privately and anonymously. You can do it on the website. You can get involved via Twitter or Facebook. You can provide comments old school. We gave you today both an exit survey that we hope you will fill out that helps us understand how this exercise went and helps us understand how we might improve as we move forward in talking about these issues, a comment card, and there's actually a little tiny word card. I apologize for the typo that's on that. But on that little word card, we'd love you to fill out your sense of the commercial centers in town now and what it might be in the future. And that's often very revealing. Just those couple of words can be amazingly revealing about the community. So we're actually going to get to work now. I'm going to have a set of table facilitators. At your table, there'll be one person designated to manage the conversation only. They are not the person drawing the drawing. We want you drawing the drawing. They're going to take some notes while the conversation's going on. They're going to help manage the conversation by being able to put ideas in play. I'm going to be available to move around the room, and that will allow the facilitators to get access if there are tough questions coming up at the table or something that needs to be dealt with. But for the most part, you'll be in the facilitator's hands. I will manage the time so that we get out of here on time today. We will be done by 12:30 by hook or by crook. We'll find a way to get done on time. Thank you.